Welcome to the podcast. Digitally, your family is in a bad neighborhood. I've used that analogy sometimes before because I think a lot of families think that if you just kind of lock the front door, so to speak, on screen safety in your family, you're good. You're going to keep the bad guys out. But I know from experience raising 8 kids, sometimes you feel like you got things locked down, and all of a sudden there's a breach somewhere in the defenses. It isn't enough to lock the front door, the back door, the windows, the chimney, the basement. A lot of times parents just feel overwhelmed. How do I stay on top of online digital safety with the phones and the iPads and the MacBooks and this and that? Today we're just going to get nitty gritty, just super concrete. What you got to do to set up layers of digital protection for yourself and for your entire family. And so we're just going to go through all the specifics because a lot of times it's just so overwhelming. Parents don't even know where to begin. They just kind of cross their fingers, hope for the best, put up like one layer. We're going to go through all 5. We got a tremendous guest, very well qualified to explain to us how we're going to do that. But before we dive in, awesome news. Our pilgrimage is on officially to Poland. It was canceled last summer because all the COVID stuff going on. But Poland just in the last week and a half has announced we're opening our doors. Whether you're vaccinated, not vaccinated, it doesn't matter. As long as you can clear a COVID test right before coming in, the doors are open. And so Father Agostino and I, he's a CFR, incredible friar priest, we just want to invite you. Come with us. Bring your family. We're going to fly into Warsaw. We're going to go down to Krakow. We're going to go to Wadowice, the birthplace of John Paul II, to Częstochowa, to Auschwitz, to where St. Maximilian Kolbe was. We're going to go for hikes in the wilderness where St. John Paul II first started sharing the bits of his manuscript, Love and Responsibility, while he was hiking with young college students and young newlywed couples. We're just going to walk in the footsteps of St. Faustina, St. Maximilian Kolbe, John Paul II, dive into their theology, and experience the beauty that Poland has to offer. If you want to go on the pilgrimage, please just go to chastity.com/pilgrimage, and you'll find all the details there. It's the beginning of August, and it's just going to be an amazing way to spend the summer. So if you're interested, bring the whole family, bring friends, and reserve your spot now because we look forward to spending that time with you. Also, last week, Exodus 90 came to our parish here in Arizona, and it was just awesome. Nathaniel, one of the guys who works with Exodus 90, is traveling around the world, and basically this huge orange trailer that says Exodus 90 on it, just going from parish to parish, encouraging guys to do this. And we've got like over 50 guys at our parish that have signed up for this, of 90 days of asceticism, to reset your life, to re-encounter God, and to reprioritize everything. If you're a guy, I've done this thing before, and it's awesome. I mean, it's tough. It is. I'm not going to lie about it. But it's amazing the fruit that comes from just taking a detox from the world for 90 days. And so a lot of the guys have just started recently to end on Easter, but if you missed the start date, any day is good to start. You just go to exodus90.com/Jason and check this thing out. I mean, it is gold. And so you're not going to want to miss the opportunity to do this. Just to reboot. There's so much noise, so many distractions, so many things we get attached to that when you cut those things out, you'll be amazed how much clarity and how much freedom and even free time you have when you get rid of kind of the excess fat out of your schedule. And so Exodus 90 is an awesome way to do that. So they're a good sponsor to our program to keep this lust is boring message out there. So please make sure to check out Exodus 90. Now, today's guest, Chris McKenna, works for Protect Young Eyes. And this is an organization that specializes in digital safety, especially for children. He's been regularly featured on news, radio, podcasts, because all the research that he's done on this topic. He even testified before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee when it comes to setting up online safety protection for children. And not only does the guy know about it and talk about it, he lives it. He's a father of 4 kids. So he knows the challenges that we're all facing. And he's the one he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And so he's in the trenches with us, only I think he's really got the expertise to help us to figure out what do we need to do to actually create screen safety for our entire family. So Chris, I want to welcome you to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Happy to be here.
Well, what got you passionate about this? I mean, were you into this stuff before you had the kids, or is it having kids made you realize, oh my goodness, we got to shore up our defenses? What made you passionate about this subject?
Well, yeah, not a path I expected to be on at all. Very few people, I think, would choose to jump into some of the stuff that, right, I have to dive into in order to understand the risks that are out there. But I believe this is what God has called me to do. Yeah. And so it comes from my career started off as a CPA. I was a consultant, believe it or not, that fixed business problems. The Lord then called me into the local church. I worked with junior high and junior high ministry. And it was from 2009, Jason, to 2016, while I was leading junior high ministry, when junior high kids started carrying the internet with them, right? Imagine a time when that's a new thing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's when I was leading them, right? And so parents started asking me a lot of questions. I'm a guy who likes to solve problems. I started doing research for them, really just kind of organically. But you were talking about Exodus 90. I've done that with a couple of my friends too. Part of my story, Jason, is also I was exposed to pornography as a young boy that led to issues as an adult. And so I just sort of had this sort of intersection between watching kids get online, my own history with pornography, and going, somebody's got to start talking about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I just started conversations at church, put together a small Facebook group, started doing some research that led to launching the website protectingeyes.com in 2015. And from there, the rest of it is just the progression of a lot of people asking a lot of questions, right? This is a space where a lot of really amazing parents simply don't have all of the answers, because the childhood that their children are experiencing is so radically different from theirs. And so what Protect Young Eyes does is we stand in that gap between amazing families and technologies that honestly, Jason, don't care about our children. And we try to translate the risks that exist in that gap so that families can make the best choices to both prepare and protect their kids online.
Yeah, I was just in out back east doing a couple talks at high schools, and a couple of things came up after these talks. One kid had mentioned to me, he's like, yeah, my parents put this filter blocking thing on my phone, but, I just go into settings, go to this thing, click that thing over, and it just shuts it off. And then when I'm done looking at porn, I just turn it back on, and I'm back. And the parents have no idea. I mean, they think we got our bases covered. We block porn on Safari or whatever. We're good to go. But This kid is so much more tech savvy than the parents are. One girl came up after the talk too, and she said, after your chastity talk, the one thing I know I need to do, I need to delete Snapchat, because she said, I get on there. And immediately, there's just drugs. Here's where you can get drugs. People offering me drugs on Snapchat. There's porn on Snapchat. Guys requesting this and that from me on Snapchat. It's just like there's so many ways to get in. And I love how you've kind of broken it down. Okay, here's the 5 layers of what you've got to do to protect your family. It's not enough to do number 4. We got to do. So start us from the top. Like, what would you say would be the kind of the first layer of defense digitally for families?
That's right. And actually, to reverse even the word there, it's actually starting at the bottom, because what I want, Jason, is a foundation on which we can build other layers. And you just hit on a couple of real life examples from talking to the kids. And I do talks right out there too, just mostly on how kids can maintain a sense of identity and worth inside of apps that want to reduce their identity and worth to likes, comments, posts, and shares, right? And there's a big difference between those two things. We have an algorithm that's saying you're worth this, and we have a God who says you're worth this. And I want to try to help them understand their true worth. And in those conversations with kids, like you said, they always are going to know more. So the first thing I put in front of parents in my parent talks is the reality is they're going to know more. What happens, moms and dads, when you try to control another human being who knows more about the topic that you're trying to control them in? Yeah. They are automatically going to want to do the very thing that you want to do. And so if we adopt an attitude of control in our relationship with our sons and daughters when it comes to technology, really all we do, Jason, is we force them into all becoming a bunch of little digital ninjas. And we inadvertently actually chase them into the very things that we don't want them to do because they know more. And so it's sort of just a mind shift. We even have this thing that we go and look for called parental controls, right? Mm-hmm. You look for parental controls. I look for parental controls. That is the worst name on the planet. Now, I didn't know you until a few years ago, but I want to imagine the 14-year-old version of Jason for just a minute, okay? Yeah. Right? 14 years old, right in the thick of upper junior high and all of your awesomeness, and I'm sure awesome hair and all those things. Oh, yeah. Imagine your parents coming up to you, Jason, and saying, hey, man, I have got a great idea for your teenage years. Do you know what it's called? It's called parental control. Yeah. Isn't that everything that a 14-year-old wants in their life? They're like, yes, that's what I want, is more parental control. Of course not. You would have hated that idea just as much as they hate that idea today. And so I say that because everything about what I'll describe in the layers, I want us to approach through a lens of empathy. Because if TikTok existed when you and I were kids, we'd be addicted to it too. If Snapchat existed when a lot of my classmates were around, I'm convinced a few of us would probably be in prison right now, right? Because it's the same sort of temptations. They're just in these apps, different than what we experience. And so that very first layer, the bottom of a triangle, if I can imagine like 5 layers in a triangle to put a visual out there, is what we call the digital trust framework. So after 1,400 presentations in 6 years, I've studied families that tend to have kids who tend to use technology in a good, honorable, noble way. And the families who have those kinds of kids tend to do 5 things consistently and persistently. And that is copy me, this idea of modeling, co-play, doing technology with your kids, shoulder to shoulder, watching things with them, then a curiosity around those, not a condemnation, but a curiosity around what they like online. Because I would argue that one of the best ways to learn about what your kids are uncertain about or have questions about, or their what they deep wonderings, look at their search history, look at their YouTube watch history, not as a way to catch them doing something wrong, Jason, but as a way to learn what the algorithm knows about your kid that you don't. Okay. Right? So that's curiosity, and then conversation is the 4th element, and then coaching. And these are things that we do a whole 90-minute talk just on that one layer that I'm not going to do for you right now, but I want to establish that bottom layer of what we often think of as just go buy the next software. No. It has to start with developing digital trust, one brick, one step, one conversation, one drip at a time, long before we ever look for a technical solution, because technical solutions will never fully protect your kids when it comes to what happens online.
Now that second point that you made, was it to co-play with, like to be alongside of them as you're
That's
installing
right.
this stuff? Can you go into that just a little bit? It just piqued my interest.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. You've got young kids like I do.
Yeah.
And Jason, I have no idea why young kids love watching other kids unwrap toys on YouTube. I think it's the dumbest, most annoying thing ever, right? They love doing that.
3.5 billion views. Yeah.
Right. But if that's what your kid's into, then you sit down next to them and you act interested in it too. Because if your 6, 7, or 8-year-old son or daughter starts to believe that shoulder to shoulder, I can do technology with my dad, when the issues really aren't that big, I believe that plants a seed inside of them that says technology with my dad is okay. And when the problems get bigger later on, I know that I can go to dad about those things, or I can go to mom about those things. It's the principle of, from as young of an age as possible, Jason, I want our families, our children, to believe that technology is a we activity and not a me activity. Yeah. Because one-on-one with the internet, whether you're 4, 14, or 40, all of us eventually lose. I have a whole trail of one-night promises to prove the fact that one-on-one with the internet, you eventually lose. And so I want my kids from a very young age to know that tech with me is a good thing. That's what I mean by that.
Okay. To what extent do you draw them into the online security measures that you're establishing? I always tell the parents, don't tell the kids, now we're going to know what you're looking at online. Rather say, hey, we're going to put this on all the devices so you can know what your dad's looking at, dad can know what your sister's looking at. Like, we're going to hold each other accountable to the principles of the gospel. Do you kind of preemptively let them know, like, hey, we're installing this and that. Let me show you what I'm doing. This is why we're doing it. And, I'm on the same page that you are. We're in this together in the battle. Are there any times where you don't let them in on what surveillance measures you're taking? What are the proper steps there in terms of the relational aspect of those ideas?
So Jason, in 6 years and tens of thousands of conversations, only twice have I ever said to a parent, it's okay to spy on your kids. Okay. One time it was because there was a young lady who was a danger to herself. Mm-hmm. And the other time because of a young man who was a danger to others. Yeah. Other than that, spying teaches your children nothing. It actually teaches them how to avoid and evade you. And so from a very young age, I want all of my kids to know that every single internet connected device is co-owned. That while you're in my house, if you are a minor in my house, here's the tone of my conversation. It's, Aren't I an amazingly benevolent, kind father that while you're in my house, I've let you use this internet connected device, right? So there's no such thing as your device. This is ours. We use this together, and you're going to use it maybe more than others, amazing 15-year-old daughter of mine, but I know what your 6-digit passcode is. And I'm going to put this software on it, not because I want to catch you doing something wrong, but because amazing, beautiful daughter of mine, every single time I give you and let you use this internet connected device, as if I'm allowing 100 million people into your life. And what kind of father would I be if I didn't try to stop them from doing something bad from you? Honey, this software isn't so that I can catch you doing something wrong. It's so that I can make sure that they don't do something wrong to you. And it's the tone and the direction and the nature of that conversation that turns it from me versus you, which is, I think, what parental controls can sometimes communicate, and instead of me with you, which is that last C in the framework, which is coaching. Coaches want their players to succeed. They want to win. They want that positive outcome. And that's the nature of what I want our perspective to be when it comes to our kids online. We want them to do well here. We want them to succeed here. And so that's the perspective of coach and not a controller.
Yeah, I've tried to explain it to my kids, when they get a little uptight about it feeling restrictive and big brother and eye in the sky and all that. More like, we're just putting training wheels on you because we don't want you to crash right now. But ultimately, the goal is get rid of the wheels and send you off. That you're able to use this thing that could be potentially dangerous for freedom and, and for a good thing. And so we're just starting you off here, so it might feel a little wobbly at first, might feel a little restrictive, but there's a vision behind it other than simply purely restraining you. So if you've built that kind of relational level as the foundation, what's the next layer that you move into?
Yeah, the next layer then gets into some of the technical parts, right? I'm going to talk about the Wi-Fi layer, but you hinted at something really important, and that is, well, should you use it too, right? As dad or as mom or me? And I think the answer is yes. I have found in my use of the internet, Jason, that whatever is good for a 12-year-old is probably good for me and my walk with the Lord too. Right. So if I'm going to say to my son or daughter, hey, we're going to put screen time on this iPhone, it's important to me that they know that I use coveted eyes. Why? Because I want them to know that even dad needs help using the internet well. And I want to avoid problems too. This isn't just a them problem. This is a human thing, which then leads into that second layer, which is that Wi-Fi layer, the network. And the router is typically something that a lot of parents just go, whoa, no way, can't understand it, don't even want to touch it. Like, it's the most ignored device in every single house. And I'm here to tell all of your listeners or viewers, your router is the most important digital device in your house. So go give it a hug and love it right now. We've got to get this layer right.
Now, what is a router versus a modem versus like, what's a router? I'm like hearing people think like, I know there's a box somewhere in some part of the house with a bunch of wires sticking out of it. Is that it? Is that the modem? What is it? Where is it?
Yeah, and I didn't even buy it. My internet service provider put it in. And Chris, I haven't thought about it since, right? That's usually the conversation I have about this. So we have an exhaustive ultimate guide to routers on our website at protectingeyes.com that I wrote exactly for that kind of parent who's listening. So you have a modem, which can be a box, and that takes the signal from your internet service provider, could be AT&T or Comcast or whatever, and that then probably connects to a second box called your router. Sometimes they're combined, but more often than not, they're separate. And that router does exactly what its name implies. It routes through a wireless signal. It's sort of like conducting traffic for using the internet. Right? That's the thing that I'm talking about, that router. Because if we can stop problems at the source, then we stop a lot of the problems. When you think about how many things in your home, especially for young children, only use Wi-Fi, it's a lot of things. Chromebooks, PlayStations, Kindles, Xboxes, maybe a tablet, your smart TV, which at the end of the day, let's be honest, is just a big smartphone attached to your wall because of all the access that it has these days. All of these things connect to the wireless network in your house. And so we recommend the Griffin router. It's on the shelf there behind me. It's what I use for my family and, the 6 of us. because it blocks the junk at the source. Every single time my kid picks up a Chromebook, I know that the junk is blocked, even if that Chromebook itself doesn't have any controls on it. And it comes with an app. I can change the Wi-Fi settings from wherever I'm flying to, from any airport, wherever I'm at, Jason, if we need to make adjustments to things. So getting that layer right prevents a lot of trouble. And if it's confusing to you, then that's a great spot to invite that relationship in to say, hey, middle school son or daughter of mine who know more about this than I do. I got this thing called a router because Chris told me I should on Jason's awesome podcast. And so I don't know how to set this up. Can you help me install this thing? And then when they walk away, change the password. But what a way to have a conversation about, hey, let's do this together. Why? Because I want our whole family to be protected from the junk that's out there. So we're going to use this router, and you can actually have a relationship building, a trust building conversation from installing that layer.
Okay, now, you had mentioned you use this Griffin router. Can you just swap out whatever router that you've got through your internet service provider, put in the plugs in the same spots, and it'll just end up working the same? And then once that's in, how does that work in terms of how do you block stuff? How do you set the parental levels of what's going to be allowed in and out?
What I'll say, because there's about 4 different answers to your question, is sometimes your internet service provider requires that you use their router. If that's your scenario, then there is still a way to use Griffin. Sometimes not. Sometimes you buy your own router, or sometimes you have a router that you love that you don't want to replace, but you could still pair it up with Griffin. So all of these different sort of what if scenarios, depending on what kind of router or whether you're required to use it or not, are exactly why we wrote that blog post, to kind of go through all of those if then scenarios, because it can be complicated. It truly can.
Okay, so I'll have you email me the link to that. I'll put the link in the show notes, and so if anyone wants to dive onto that in the next layer, and if people can't, and people, if they have to stick with the one that they have, will that be able to offer them sufficient parental controls, or is it just better to get the aftermarket one?
So it can. So if they have one that's been given to them, the first step that you would see in this post, Jason, is for them to call customer service for the ISP and say, hey, are there parental controls on this? Maybe there are, and you don't even know it because the technician came, put it in, and just kind of walked out the door. Yeah. So you ask that question first. And then if the answer is not satisfactory, then yeah, you could keep that router. You could actually daisy chain it, connect it with a network cable to a Griffin, and then you let your kids get online through the Griffin so you control it, but you still have the ISP one that you parents use, because there's all kinds of possibilities out there that just depends on the situation. And if any of you are saying, okay, there's no way I could figure this out, yes, you can. You truly can. And the steps to install the Griffin router, the one that we use, are scan a QR code, you download the app, it walks you through step by step. I mean, literally, if you have installed anything at all digitally, you can figure this out. I guarantee it.
Yeah, so the key is not just to get overwhelmed and frozen of just like, it's too much, forget it, and then you just back out and just cross your fingers, hope for the best. Like, dive in, figure it out, go through the pain, buy once, cry once, and just go through it. Because then I think the peace of mind that would come afterwards of like, okay, that door's locked. So we've got relationships addressed. We've got the Wi-Fi, the router. What's the next layer?
So then let's talk about the device layer, right? What I mean by that is think of your smartphone for a minute. It doesn't have to connect to Wi-Fi in order to work, right? It can use the data plan when you're out and about on the cellular network. Same thing could be with a Chromebook. Let's say the Chromebook then travels to a friend's house, and now you're on their Wi-Fi and not connected to that awesome Griffin router that you have at your house. Or maybe it goes to grandma's house where they do homework for the weekend or something. Yeah. There's a necessity to make sure that every device also has its own controls on it. This is where it's often software, like Covenant Eyes or like something else that you're putting on the device that goes with it, so that no matter what network it's attached to, you have some assurances. Now, what that looks like is different for every single device. And so this is why at protectyoungeyes.com, and I know I've shared even some of these links with you in the past when you've had questions, Jason, is Do you have a Kindle? Do you have a Chromebook? Do you have an Xbox? Do you even have Oculus goggles now? Any of these devices, we profile step by step how to put those device level controls in place, whether they come factory on it. For example, our iPhones here, they come with parental controls on them called screen time that are free. It's just a matter of finding them and getting them all enabled the right way. And so that's where, if parents have a lot of different devices in the house, which they often do, then you want to make sure that you kind of follow all those different guides step by step to make sure that that layer is also covered.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of this stuff is self-explanatory when you just start digging a little bit, and you get into the screen time, and then you can set limits. Like, so your kid can't delete apps. He can't add apps, or he can only add apps with the password that you have. So you can see what apps they're bringing in there, in terms of the time that because it's not just this is, I think, a really important point, that it's not just the quality of what they're seeing on these devices, it's the quantity of time that they're spending with their face glowing in front of these screens. And if you think it's enough just to block, okay, the bad stuff is out and we're looking at the content and blocking that, but then the kid's on the screen for 8 hours a day, it's like, okay, we've got a whole nother thing we got to address here. And so a lot of these parental controls will even allow you to freeze the device after it's been used for X amount of time. Okay, that thing, 2 hours a day. And then if it goes beyond that, it kind of freezes, and then a thing can pop up. Do you want to extend it for 15 minutes, 10 minutes? We'll type in the parental code, because we'll have that with our kids. The devices just kind of boom, just stop at a certain time of night, and the kid's like, oh, but I still got a little bit, 15 minutes more homework, research. Okay, click, 15 more minutes. There you go. And that's so great. Like sticking curfews on these things, I found, is imperative, because like in the research I'm doing right now, I'm writing a book on gender. So many of these kids that are wrestling with this topic of especially what's called rapid onset gender dysphoria are spending so much time, in Reddit and Tumblr and YouTube and these social media influencers, like just literally marinating in this like theoretical headspace of gender and sexuality and all this stuff. It's not that they're looking at a bunch of porn. It's just they're spending way too much of their life not in real life. They're not going out and throwing a frisbee. They're not babysitting and doing chores and interacting with their families. They're just faces aglow. And so we just need to make sure. I just want to get off my little soapbox there and just it's not simply enough the quantity, quality. We got to set parameters on the quantity as well.
I'm so glad to hear you going down that path, Jason, because it's right and good to tackle the issue of pornography, but I think it's taken our eye off of some other issues that are distracting and distorting what our young people are learning. And as I talk to therapists and others about some of the issues you just mentioned, it's not that, everything on technology is bad. It does so many good things for us, but what we're starting to see in a lot of therapeutic and counseling circles, kind of on the vein of too much of it, is it gives birth to ideas and questions before they have brains able to process them, right? And so it's what I hear in therapy circles as mature information ahead of schedule. And that's something that technology can do. When you go down, and there's been all kinds of recent studies that the Wall Street Journal has done on TikTok and others, where they call it these rabbit holes, right? Where depending on what you kind of click on, the algorithm starts to preference that idea, that path. And before you know it, you are inundated with a highly addictive path of content that neurologically you just can't stop looking at. And it's all these just competing factors. And so parents ask me all the time, on this topic of what's the worst app. And that's a really complicated question to answer, because depending on what your kid is struggling with, be it porn or identity or gender, whatever it is, the apps are going to prey on them differently. So to have an idea of how much time they're spending on them in that layer, I think is a really important idea that you've hit on there really well. So for sure.
Yeah, and I know in terms of those parents who may be listening, want more details in setting up device security, any links you send me will put. And then I also know that Covenant Eyes, you guys created that Safe Family Digital Challenge. And if anyone wants to try that, that's listening to the show, if you're in the continental United States, you could just text the word SAFE to the phone number 66866, and that'll
Correct.
send you for the next 7 days a free video. It's like 4 minutes long each day, but it's
Yep.
just going to like, oh, today we're going to tackle this. Tomorrow we're going to tackle that. So by the end of the week, you'll kind of feel, okay, now I've got a better handle on how to lock down the devices. If you're outside of the United States, you can just you can just Google chastity.com/parents. So chastity.com/parents. And then we've got a link right there where you can sign up for this for free. And then you'll get through email these different videos that are going to go deeper into layers that we can't really go into full depth on this. So we've taken a look at the relational aspect. We've taken a look at the router. We've discussed in brief the devices. What's next?
The next layer would be the location layer, right? Where they're using the technologies. We want to be aware of that, right? Because certain environments cause certain types of behavior. So as sort of a family, we want to avoid bathrooms, bedrooms, buses for kids who ride the school bus, which is a real hot spot for exposure to inappropriate content. I mean, just think about the numbers on a school bus. You've got 6-year-olds along with sometimes 16-year-olds with probably a 40-to-1 adult to child ratio. And that one adult, I hope, is driving and not watching the kids so much. You know what I mean? It is a great environment to get away with whatever you want. And the other location, I love grandmas and grandpas just as much as you and Kristalina do, but grandmas and grandpas' homes can be a hotspot because they often don't have the same sort of monitoring in place, maybe the same sort of digital IQ as other locations. And so that's one of the other places. So the 5 places we typically talk about being more vigilant are bathrooms, bedrooms, buses, grandmas and grandpas' homes, and sleepovers. Those are going to be like the 5 places that tend to bring more risk, behavioral risk, when it comes to being online. And so one of the things that we started to sort of evangelize, so to speak, during COVID was what, Jason, we called the toxic trio. What the toxic trio is, it's wherever internet activity happens with 3 other things: boredom, darkness, and bedrooms. That's the toxic trio. And whenever you have internet access with boredom, bedrooms, and darkness, whether you are 14 or 40, if I could borrow language from the faith for a minute, I just think we put us in that near occasion of sin that is just unnecessary. Yeah. And I, for years, justified a lot of behavior in the middle of the night that seemed good that wasn't. I mean, there are so many things that just seem okay at night, something about the darkness that you think you can get away with it. So that's why we focus big time on, keeping those devices out of the bedrooms at night, having a cutoff time, get an old school alarm clock. And then this goes back to the digital trust part of copy me modeling, right? So if your teens aren't allowed to have their device in their room, then moms and dads, you aren't either. If your teens can't have their phone as an alarm clock, well, mom and dad, you can't either, right? So this is where we have to sort of show them the way with how we use tech so that they buy into using it that way also.
Okay, so now in terms of the geographical location of the phones, is it enough to have something like we have where it just kind of shuts off their ability to like text and web browse at a certain time? I mean, our kids aren't old enough. We don't even have the internet on their phones, but we have texting, things like that. And then if they want, they can use one of our iPads for homework for the internet. But if they have a shutoff thing, should we still geographically take the phone and say, hey, it goes to bed, on this end table, in our master bedroom or the kitchen, whatever, at 9 o'clock at night? Should we be geographically moving it, or is it enough to have one of those time caps?
I think that the movement physically away has been actually proven in school settings. And I could pull up the exact study, but we've done a lot of writing about the impact of technology in the classroom. And the mere presence of a digital device, even if it's not buzzing or notifying the kid, actually had a negative impact on test scores. Wow. In other words, the sheer possibility of me being distracted or part of my sort of mental space being on the fact that I could be missing something because I can see my phone was enough to have a measurable impact on their academic performance. So that just tells me that my kid's going to be better off if it's away from them when I want them resting, right? Just physically move it away from them wherever possible. Now, if you got older kids, you're in that phase of actually trying to teach them how to manage some of that on their own. Like I have a 17-year-old daughter. I'm going to be slightly less restrictive about that just because I am trying to teach her how not to need me and how to, make some of those decisions on her own. But for youngers, especially junior high, and early high school where sleep is so important, I'm a big fan of putting it somewhere else.
Okay, so that's bedroom. And then in terms of like bus, I mean, it makes total sense because like when I grew up, I mean, I didn't have a cell phone on the bus, and so I was doing like the Napoleon Dynamite thing of like throwing an action figure out the window with some string and dragging it down to the street behind. Like that was the worst thing I was doing on the school bus at the time. But now I can't even imagine if I had like a smartphone on a school bus. But some parents maybe think, well, hey, my kid needs a phone on the bus. I mean, they're riding the city bus home on the way from school or the subway or this or that. I don't want them to be digitally disconnected if they need me. How do you keep them safe if they need the device in one of these locations, like the bus?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's where every family has to balance the risk. Going back to my consulting background where my job was to mitigate risk for businesses. I still see my job as a parent to mitigate risk. I can't eliminate all of it. And so I have to take my kid and their situation and put things in place that balance my needs and the risks that are available to them. And if getting in touch with my kid through talk, text, or GPS is really important, but I don't want them to have portable internet, then there are devices for that. There are Gab phones, there are Pinwheel or TrueMe. There are phones where I can still achieve the goal of connecting with my child or knowing where my child is without burdening them with the baggage that comes with some of those other digital environments.
Okay, now what are the names of some of those phones again that you could get for like an entry point phone for a kid without all the extra risks?
Yeah, so Gab, Gabb, Gab phone is one that we highly recommend. Even they can often get a discount through using us going through our website to get it. Some of the relationships that you have, Jason. So it's a great one. They have been a partner of ours for a number of years. Like you said, a great entry level phone, purely private. They don't have any third-party apps. All the apps on their phone are all their own apps. So there's nothing third-party. There's no transactions, tracing, any of that going on. Talk, text, GPS, no gaming, no social media, no internet, right? Because my position at Protect Young Eyes is that no kid who isn't in high school, they don't need portable internet. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah.
And social media to me is like an age 15 thing. Not because I'm a horribly mean, father, but because I understand adolescent neurology. And I just don't think they have brains that can adequately process all of those pressures. I mean, as a former, junior high youth minister, middle school has enough drama. It doesn't need help. Right. And I think we burden our kids with this access in a spirit of wanting to stay connected. And it brings so many other anxieties and temptations and problems with it that often offsets any of the good that we intended by giving it to them.
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned that at the beginning in terms of the social media, the anxiety where these kids kind of gauge their value on how many likes and how many shares and, and how many days they have in a row connected to their friend through this particular app. I mean, it's just overwhelming for any kid. Like, so, I mean, for our kids, I mean, they don't have any social media, other than like, I mean, on some Pinterest thing for my daughter and she likes to look at recipes or this or that. Okay, fine, whatever. But in terms of, Instagram, Twitter, definitely not Snapchat, definitely not, TikTok. We just haven't found the need for any of that stuff. It's like, why introduce that? Hey, go FaceTime your friend, go talk to the person, because it's just, to me, I mean, there's so much anxiety with these kids today. That thing to me is the number one culprit. So we went through kind of the bus, the bathroom, the bedroom, grandma and grandpa's. How do you set up security there? Do you basically tell the grandparents, hey, I'd love to have the kids visit, whatever, but while they're there, I don't want them playing with your phones. They're not allowed to use the computers. They can use this little video game system you've got, and that's it. Or grandma, grandpa, you need to install Covenant Eyes, and here's how you do that. What are some ways to set up security over there where it might not even be on their radar?
Yeah, so no different than what we just described. I think there's a relational way to do that at grandma and grandpa's house, and I think that there's a technical way to do that. Starting with the technical, I mean, a great gift for grandma and grandpa's house is to get them that router, get them that device that's going to create a Wi-Fi network in their home that is safer, right? Just from the get-go. What a great gift. And if they don't understand how to do it, then you or their grandson or granddaughter do it with them, for them. That's a great thing. I sometimes joke, I love it when grandparents come to my parent talks because that means they're trying so hard. I
Yeah.
mean, imagine being removed 2 generations from some of these topics that we're talking about, how intimidating that must be for them. And so when they show up, I'm like, thank you so much for being here. And then I kind of go through a little role playing with them where I'll say, I think it's a really great idea when your grandsons or granddaughters come over, if they have a device, just bake a batch of cookies, put them on a plate, set them on the table, invite your grandson or granddaughter to come sit down across from them and have a conversation like this. Say, amazing grandson or granddaughter of mine, I don't understand this TikTok or Snappy Chat thing, but you know what? I don't need to. Because if I ever catch you doing something on grandma's Wi Fi while you're here, I will make your life miserable. And then just get up and walk away and offer them a cookie. Like, just walk away. Like, I mean,
Awesome.
actually have a little bit of fun with it and kind of look at them and say, hashtag joking, not joking. I just want you to know that while you're here, that's not okay. And you and I both know, right? Because we know scripture that whatever you put out in the light automatically has less control over you.
Hmm.
So I'm just a big fan of grandmas and grandpas calling out what they don't get, calling out what they don't want to have happen. And automatically, it's slightly less enticing for the grandson or granddaughter to go there because that's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's a relational way of just sort of going at it with a little bit of a smile on your face to let
Yeah.
them know that you're with them on this and not. So I have a lot of fun with that. They tend to appreciate that and have some fun with it too. So
No, it seems like a good talking point just because a lot of these kids, if they think it's not even on the radar, they're prone to see what they can get away with. Whereas if they know this is not only on the radar, but if I betray this person's trust, it's going to damage my relationship with my own grandparent. It's like, I'll sneak around at somebody else's house, not grandma and grandpa's, because, I love them and I don't want to even burn that bridge. And so I
right.
think it's good just to air it out there like, hey, I know what's going on and I'm going to make your life miserable. I mean, it's got that sense of humor, but the seriousness, I like it now. And so we've locked down, these different elements and like the router, but I would imagine the routers probably can't catch certain things in terms of it might be able to block certain stuff off the internet, but if the kid's using a device that maybe has apps, I don't know if it can block all of that. I know that final layer of digital security is apps. What can parents do there?
Well, and there's a reason it's the last one. There's a reason that it's the very tip and smallest part of the pyramid because it's the weakest. Jason, you and I know from having worked with teenagers that apps are the wild, wild west.
Mm.
And nothing that we've talked about actually really sees inside of them. There is nothing that effectively filters Snapchat. There is nothing that effectively filters the Explore feature on Instagram. There is very little in the way of parental controls that actually exists on any of these apps. I mean, amazingly, the only popular app that kids use today that has parental controls that I can lock in place is TikTok. It's the only one. I can actually pair my phone. If my child is under 16, I can pair my phone with TikTok on it to their phone and I can control their TikTok experience.
Hmm.
Now, that controls the content, meaning it blocks out some of the more sexualized content. That doesn't change the addictiveness of TikTok,
Yeah.
which, man, I don't know about you. I cannot believe how addictive, even as an adult, the content in that app is. It figures you out like nothing else out there. So
Yeah.
it helps with one thing and not the other. All of that to say to parents, relying on apps for their toggles and their little, YouTube's little toggle, it means nothing. Most of it can be toggled off. Most of it are what I call parental suggestions and not parental controls because kids can just go ahead and turn them off, which is then really what you're left with goes all the way back to the bottom is if you're going to have a kid who regularly chooses to use Snapchat well or to use Instagram well, your primary control is the relationship. And saying to your amazing teenage sons or daughters, hey, you know what? I'm nervous giving this to you. Now, you've given me no reason to not trust you. You've made awesome choices. And this is why I'm giving this adult app to you now. But there's a lot of things that you can do inside of here that I might never know. Again, it's that principle of putting it out there and just calling that out
Yeah.
as a relational way of entering into that. And then, and this may be the most important part of it, and I want this to be the part of what grandparents say too, looking at them after you've laid those things out there and saying to them, if any of that ever happens to you, or if you do anything that causes someone else harm, I want you to know that I am safe and that you can bring that to me. And that in the same way that God loves me and all of my mess, I will continue to love you. There's nothing that can change that. There's no picture you could ever send. There's no video or image or anything you could ever do on this phone that would ever change the way that I feel about you. And so I think those are just some of the tones of that conversation. We hand those adult apps. I mean, Jason, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube, these are adult apps. And to put them in the hands of 13, 14, and 15-year-olds, and then be surprised when their underdeveloped adolescent brain misuses them, that's actually our fault.
Yeah.
That should never surprise us. Instead, have we created an environment where when that happens, they'll bring it to us instead of trying to deal with it on their own.
Yeah, no, this is really good stuff. And so I encourage the parents that are listening, if the idea of the apps is kind of scary, just remember that you can control their ability to install or delete apps. And so you can, as Chris is saying, gradually bring apps into their life when you think it's best. Because there might be, some kid who's 17 who's not ready for this stuff. Whereas one who's 15 who might be able to handle this responsibly. And as the parents, you ultimately know best.
That's right.
Yep.
Good stuff.
We were talking earlier about the Earn It Act. What's going on there? Some good news, I think.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. One of the things that we work really hard on is, Jason, it's just time. It's just time that we had laws that adequately protected our kids online. And so we live in a time right now in 2022 where most of the laws that protect our kids are decades old. And I want to get us to a spot where we have guardrails in place around the organizations that are building these applications that care for the most vulnerable among us. And right now we don't have that. We do not have enough guardrails in place, right? We talk about covenant eyes, right? What is that? That's accountability for you and I. They have no accountability for the choices that they make with our children. And so I just think that's a wrong spot to be in. If we're a society that can't adequately protect our children, then I think we've kind of lost our way. And so the Earn It Act is something that has been worked on off and on over the past 2.5, almost 3 years. Going back to a hearing that I was a part of, you mentioned in my bio back in the summer of 2019. And we're on the cusp of maybe some really great things there. And I can't wait for people to, I can't say a whole lot more about it right now, but if people want to follow us, when you hear this, watch this, listen to it at Protect Young Eyes, hopefully there's some things there that we can share more about that. Are you okay there, my man?
Yeah, just have a little cough, a little bug there.
You've got a tickle going on there.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. And so I just want, people to be aware of that. It's a really important part of what we do, and to come follow us and be a part of that, because there are actions that everyday moms and dads can take, whether it's sending letters, filling out forms, that go to senators and representatives, all kinds of great things there that I want to make sure that everybody feels empowered to do. That stuff really matters. It really does. And, follow us and we'll let you know what the next step is.
Hey, Chris, that is super helpful with regard to the app. I know before we were on the show, we were talking about the Earn It Act. Can you share some of that good news with the listeners?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit. For the past 2.5 years since I testified in front of the Senate, we've been working with various offices, really in an effort to get the laws that protect our kids to catch up to the risks that exist today, right? I just talked about the risks that are out there. I mean, Jason, the laws that are out there right now do not adequately protect our children. Now, I'm not trying to say the government needs to do our job as parents. That's our job, right, to parent our kids. But I still believe, in the same way that accountability is good for you and I, there should be guardrails of accountability out there for trillion-dollar businesses who don't care about our kids. And that's what's missing right now. And so the Earn It Act was drafted, and it's been out there in various forms. And I hope that there's some good news coming up about that. People just can follow us to stay plugged in. Why? Because I want everybody to have an opportunity to do something. Usually when you talk about politics, people think, well, I got to tune out. I can't do that. No, yes, you can. It is really important for constituents to be communicating their desires to their U.S. Senate and House representatives. And I'm going to provide some really easy ways for your followers to do that through our various channels to let everyday moms and dads like you and I know how we can influence politics in a really positive way for our families.
So how can people get a hold of you, get in touch with all the good work that you guys are doing over there at Protect Young Eyes?
The website's one way, right? Just protectyoungeyes.com. Jason, we're pretty active on social media. I know I kind of bang on social media for what they're doing to our kids, but at the same time, I'm going to, like you, use it to promote a lot of good God-honoring things as long as I can here. And that's on Instagram or Facebook primarily, just Protect Young Eyes. We also have a newsletter that they can attach to, just like what you described before with those videos where they can text the word safe to the number 66866 to get those videos. They can also text the word protect to the number 66866 to receive our newsletter. I was actually the one who set up that system with Covenant Eyes that you described. And strangely, when they get those videos from you, they'll see my face because I also work there and do that work for them. So people are going, wait a minute, this guy's on both sides. You're right. I am. Protect Young Eyes is mine, what I do on the side, but I also do digital marketing for Covenant Eyes, an organization that you and I both love. So those are some ways to stay in touch with what we do so that, all together. The story I use is, if you've seen the Disney movie A Bug's Life, right? So at the end, it's the few grasshoppers, and the ants finally realize that in their numbers, they have the power, and they run the grasshoppers out of town. Yeah. So everybody listening and watching this later, we are the ants. And the only way we are going to run the grasshoppers out of town is for us to all come together. And so that's why I need everybody's help.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Chris as much as I did. One of the main points that he made there at the beginning was the importance of building relationships with our kids. I think one of the best ways we can do that is through prayer. And so I want to again recommend to our listeners the app Hallow. Last night I was on a road trip with my kids and they were getting kind of rowdy in the car. I had 5 of them to myself in like a 3-hour car ride. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to intervene? So I was like, hey, I'm going to get the Hallow app. Popped it in. We did like an 18-minute rosary together, and it's just amazing the atmosphere that it created. And so if you haven't tried it yet, give this thing a shot. They even have a specific session just for kids on that app. And so it's hallow.com/lustisboring, and you can try this thing for free. It is awesome. I also want to make a big thank you to everyone who's been supporting us on Patreon. You guys make this show possible. And so if this message has been a blessing to you or to your families, please consider becoming part of our Patreon community. These are individuals who give a monthly amount, whether it's like $3 a month, $5 a month, 20 more, and in exchange for your generosity to us, we send you free stuff. And then when I come to your town, perhaps we can meet up, do dinner, depending on what tier of support you choose for Patreon. We'll send you personal videos, personal email, personal phone call, you name it, just to show our gratitude for helping to do your little part to help us keep our ministry afloat. And so if you want to support us at any amount, just go to patreon.com/Jason Everett, and then you can sign on and learn about the different levels of support there. So God bless you guys. Be assured of my prayers. And again, don't forget the pilgrimage in Poland this summer. If you're thinking of going, pray about it and go. Father Agostino Torres and I would love to spend that week with you this summer. Just go to chastity.com/pilgrimage, and we hope to see you there. God bless.